Ooh, what's up, Star Wars Celebration? My name's Dirty.
And I'm Clarus.
And I'm Darth Chaco.
That is right. We are live for the first time ever on a panel because we read books, and there are other people who like books.
Yeah.
And apparently they like to hear us talk about books.
Don't know how that happened, but you know, I'll take it.
That was a happy accident. And we're so blessed to be joined by Darth Chaco.
Yeah, I'm super excited to join, and I love this book, so I was super excited to get a chance to come on it and talk about it.
Yeah. So we're here today to talk about the new book Brotherhood, a novel by Mike Chen, which is the there's a lot of jokes in Star Wars that anytime anyone says anything in Star Wars, there will eventually be a story told about that moment. In 2005, a movie came out called Revenge of the Sith.
Don't know it.
Don't know it? Well, it's pretty good. I remember it because it came out...
There are conflicting opinions on that movie, for sure.
It came out just 4 days before my oldest sister's 14th birthday. And so we were going to go see a movie as a family. We went to Montana Steakhouse, and then we went to go see Star Wars. And I got to choose the movie because it was Star Wars, and I was like, no, we have to see this one. It's opening day. And my sister fell asleep, and I got very upset with her. I was personally offended.
You're the worst. It's like her birthday. How dare you fall asleep in this movie I chose for your birthday?
But about 40 minutes into the movie, they've crash landed a ship, and they're tallying past times Anakin has saved Obi-Wan.
Half a ship, yeah.
Important reminder. And Obi-Wan turns to Anakin and says that time on Cato Neimoidia doesn't count. And so we got a book.
Brotherhood was born. Which is why we love Star Wars. Literally anything can be turned into a novel or a TV show or a movie, and it's great.
Yeah, a gonk droid, we'll just keep on telling that story. But this is a story about Obi-Wan Kenobi and a mission that he sets out on with the help of his friend Anakin, despite the fact that the Jedi Council maybe doesn't want Anakin intervening.
Yeah, well, I think part of it, this is kind of a really exciting, pivotal moment for Anakin. Obviously, if you're here, I'm hoping you've read this book because there's going to be spoilers. Anakin has his graduation ceremony, and he's now no longer Padawan. He's a Jedi Knight, and that's a really important moment, I think, obviously for the history of both Anakin and Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
It changes the relationship immensely, and watching them figure out what that new relationship turns into was probably one of the biggest highlights of the book for me, because it was one of the things that stuck out in my mind. Between movies, how did we get here? And thankfully we have incredible creators who fill in those gaps for us. But
yeah, and I think that by placing it around the graduation, what I found so fascinating about the novel was that it really is a story about three men, and the third man in this story is Qui-Gon Jinn.
yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, when it comes to the change in the relationship, it really, it calls back to Attack of the Clones quite a bit. And in that, Obi-Wan is kind of always irritated at Anakin. It's like,
Yes.
I came to save you, Master. Good job. And
Right.
you get some of the best sassy Obi-Wan moments there. But now that they're on even playing field where he's not directly responsible, all the dumb things that Anakin does are now funny, and and then they work together, and that's that change. But man, when they call back to Qui-Gon and Qui-Gon's relationship with Obi-Wan, and I found a lot of that really touching in the book.
Yeah, I was not expecting that, if I'm being completely honest. I did not think that he would play such an important role in this book and in this story, but they really call back to him several times, and how he influenced both of them and what their lives turned into because of him. And I mean, yeah, I love Liam Neeson, right? I would love always more Qui-Gon stuff, and he was in this book without being in this book, which was really beautifully done.
And I think what's fascinating is the book, in a way, addresses a conversation that I think Star Wars fans have been having for years now, which is the question of if Qui-Gon doesn't die at the end of Phantom Menace, does the relationship that Anakin have with the Jedi Council and with his own future change, right? Would Qui-Gon have raised Anakin in a way that Obi-Wan couldn't as the replacement mentor that he had to become because, obviously, a spoiler alert, Qui-Gon dies at the hands of Maul.
What?
Yeah, I know, it's very sad.
So a belly button piercing accident.
Wow.
Yeah, they were in a Claire's, and so the inciting incident of this whole book at a pared down Jedi Knight ceremony for Anakin and a bunch of people who I later found out were like Mike Chen's friends, whose names he threw into the book. Kirsten Witt is apparently one of his editors and stuff like that.
That's so cool.
Which I love. If any of my friends could write a Star Wars book so that you could try and fit David into Star Wars in a fun way.
David?
It would be like David.
Yeah, it would not be. I'm sorry.
But it gets cut short because Cato Neimoidia gets attacked, and we find out that Anakin apparently really remembers the Trade Federation from when he was a kid because he really hates the Neimoidians.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of it's really approached nicely in the book, separating like, oh, this is they're not a monolith culture, but yeah, he had some bad experiences.
He never met one though. I was a little curious as to like specifically the Neimoidians. I understand like the battle droids. When I was thinking back to Phantom Menace, I was like, I don't think Anakin is ever in the same room as one.
I think the
presence
closest
was felt.
Yeah, I think the closest is like he's in the cockpit of the Naboo starfighter, like taking out their ships. But that's
At 9.
At 9.
Traumatizing.
Wow.
It's a traumatizing
God,
moment for a child.
I wish I'd accomplished things by 9.
I wish you'd accomplish things by now.
Yeah, me too.
And so they, Obi-Wan decides that he's going to come up with a plan, goes to the archives fail him. Jocasta Nu doesn't come through. It's so sad. But my boy does. And we get arguably the greatest scene in all of Star Wars, which is Obi-Wan Kenobi going back to Dexter Jettster's diner. I've got the shirt. I love my boy Dex so much. And how did you guys feel about Dexter Jettster saving the day here?
I love Dexter Jettster so much.
I love him.
It's completely irrational. You will never see Obi-Wan happier than when he walks in and sees Dex.
Yeah.
Like, that's I mean, yes, of course Obi-Wan has charisma with everyone, but like there's love there, you know?
Yeah. He looks at Dex more fondly than he does Satine in some of those Clone Wars episodes.
Oh man, I loved that. I loved that even in the scene wasn't very long, but that Obi-Wan was given perspective by Dexter Jettster, the diner owner. Like he's this Jedi master now. He's like at the moment kind of temporarily on the council.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a big deal hotshot, and Dex is like, no, you're thinking about this all wrong. Like I have some news for you.
Well, and it thematically, what I love so much about Dexter Jettster's presence is it thematically bridges the missing link for the Jedi Order in terms of getting from the wise guardians to being the generals who do not politically have the ability to negotiate with the Senate in a way that gives them any leverage. And Dexter Jettster is the character in Attack of the Clones and in this book who's pointing out to Obi-Wan, who's like, the way that you view the world is not going to work for the way that the world is going. And to have this very ground level character explain that to this very high level character in Obi-Wan and in this Jedi master, and have this guy who works at a diner being like, no, you don't know if that's not how the world works.
No, yeah.
They needed a little reality.
Yeah.
But I mean, we know he has a much deeper history than it.
Oh, 100%.
You don't
Yes.
run into toxic darts working at a diner. I hope not. But
I've been in some New York City diners. It's toxic.
It also calls back to Revenge of the Sith when Obi-Wan walks on the invisible hand and you hear Grievous say, the negotiator.
Yeah.
A lot of those negotiating skills he learned from Dexter.
Well, and I think that's clear in this book, especially to someone like me. For this panel, I'm basically bringing perspective of I didn't read a lot of Star Wars books. When I was young, I had the OG3, and then I watched the movies, and a lot of the extra stuff I unfortunately did not get to experience until, kind of currently. I'm in the middle of watching Clone Wars. We have a podcast, Jawa Chatter, with these guys over here where we're doing watch through. And I really, really love in this book how they call to the whole idea of like being called general and being part of the war, and that being at this moment in time kind of a weird thing, because in the Clone Wars it just feels like this is normal and it's established, and we haven't really got to touch on where I am. I've watched basically season 1 of Clone Wars. We've touched on like it seems pretty normal to everybody, whereas in this we're seeing the evolution into that, which I like really appreciated that insight.
I loved Mike Chen adding the moment where the acknowledgement that, because generals always felt weird in the Clone Wars. It's one of those things where it's like, how did they come up with general?
Yeah.
And why is everybody general? Like all the Jedi have the same rank, and it's just sort of a thing the clones started doing because they didn't have a framework.
That 14-year-old girl general.
Yeah.
Great.
She can do backflips, so she's clearly a general.
Yeah.
Well, it also cements that it was Palpatine who really started the initiative of trying to get the Padawans involved in the war early so that they would be more acclimated with it. But yeah, here's a 14-year-old in a tube top.
Yeah.
Send her on the front line.
Yeah.
It'd be fine. It'd be
Casual.
fine. But that mixture of trying to like input these people in the military is just funny to me. And we also get some of that in some of the like Vader comics where he's just this random dude that like didn't go through the school and doesn't follow any rules, and they're like, why are you here? Like,
What are you doing here?
Well, it is fun. At the end of the book, not to skip too far ahead, but I will. At the end of the book, they're kind of like playfully choosing their armor. And, they're talking about their pauldrons and their, the Obi-Wan
when
gets
they
excited.
try it on, yes.
And I was like,
that
so
was very cool.
You intentionally put on armor, but you gave the child none of it? They were like, none of it fits Ahsoka, so the bandeau top will be fine. She's great.
She's small, she's feisty.
don't you play video games? Women's armor.
That's only at high levels.
It just
How it
works
works.
different.
So Chaco, it gets skimpier the older they are.
You also brought up, when we were chatting about the book, that Mike Chen writes Palpatine like wonderfully.
Oh, incredible.
Palpatine in this book is gross, like the smoothest way,
Yeah.
Like I completely understand Obi-Wan's like reservation and also Anakin's eagerness in his interactions with him, and as a kid watching the prequels, I was always like, of course he's the bad guy, like why do you, and it gets more complicated when you realize the relationships these people had, and reading this I was like, yeah, right, Anakin was a literal child, and Palpatine was smooth. He was never pushy, right? He was never outwardly, overly manipulative. He like bided his time, and I think that was the biggest reason that everything fell apart.
It's a little creepy.
Was it, well, yeah.
I mean, for sure.
Palpatine, the original groomer.
I mean, Palpatine is not a good person, so.
I mean, sorry.
Ooh. I mean, you're not.
But so we get
It's
this.
written very well.
Obi-Wan and Dex, they make this plan, and what it cuts to on the other side of this initial story, before we get to Cato Neimoidia, we get date nights. We get Padme and Anakin going on a date, and this was the stuff that I was like, God, I wish that we could get this in live action. I just think we should go back in time and just film a couple Padme Anakin dates.
Yeah. As opposed to, I hate sand. Great.
I don't mind the sandline. The floating, the CGI pair. It's like the CGI in that movie that is the hardest to watch.
Yeah.
The bite disappears a second before she
Yeah,
bites
yeah.
it.
I know, and you're like, oh,
It hurts me every time.
If they want to remaster one thing in those prequels, I would just love that pair to just look like, just have like ray tracing on it or something.
Ray tracing.
Yeah, like the light hits it weird, and so it's just like they're both clearly just going like this, and there's this very odd like.
God, I'd love to watch them film that scene.
But you're exactly. I mean, the films skip. The Clone Wars encapsulate their relationship.
Yeah. Mhm.
So we don't ever see them. Like we see it start, we see it end horribly, but we don't get to see them be a couple. We don't get to see why they're in love, and that's been a huge complaint with a lot of people in the families of like,
Yeah.
why is she with him?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
he's handsome, but like she's bringing a lot more to the table.
Yeah. Yeah.
A
Gotta
little bit.
step up a little bit. I don't know.
But we get to see these date nights and their relationship, and it's really heartwarming.
And I loved that their relationship was really demonstrated to us through the way in which they show care for the other person's emotional health, right? Like Padme taking him to go get the
hot
halal
dogs.
stand, you know, the sand cooked meat skewer that they eat.
Yeah.
But that it's like the food from Tatooine, and like I really appreciate it. Even in the moment where Anakin's driving this racer around this racetrack, and they're going crazy, and he's doing the
She's
thing
like,
that he
never
loves.
again.
But his internal monologue that we're reading through Mike Schmidt's writing is, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done this, right? Like he's acknowledging, he's like, oh, I don't know if she's enjoying this, and I need to be more mindful of that in the future. And like I felt like they had a weirdly healthy relationship for where we know it ends up.
It wasn't all bad.
No, there were beautiful moments here.
Yeah, there were. And I remember when I was reading the scene where he gives her his hair, and I was like, oh God. I was like, well, okay, no, like it's kind of sweet, but my initial reaction was like, oh, okay, wow, that's a choice.
It was encased in carbonite.
Don't give me your hair, please. I'm okay.
Okay, it was a vast improvement over the EU one where it was just the hair, like
is that a
just-
thing?
Just the lock of hair, yeah. Versus
I did
it
not
actually
know
being
that. That is
encased in
weird.
carbonite, so it's actually.
I'll take the carbonite. Yeah.
Rather than
Yeah.
just-
I would rather that.
There's a handful of loose hair.
No, yeah, I'm okay. The idea of it though is really sweet, right? Because she's like, wait, like Jedi can't have material possessions. And what is this? And he's like, well, it's like a part of me. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's kind of sweet, I guess. Like,
At what
It
point?
could have been his lost arm. Like, what if it's a part of me.
I'd like to give you a hand.
oh God, no, I can't get that out of me.
That is a good way to bring up though. Anakin, we've never really talked in Star Wars about what it is like to have one of these. They call them mechno-arms. But because everyone just kind of puts it on and it works. When we see Anakin in the Clone Wars, his hand works, and there is a through line in this novel that I did not expect in a million years, which is him coming to terms with it and realizing how he has to treat it differently.
Yeah, I again, when I was watching these movies, when I saw Luke get a hand for the first time, I was like, oh, it just works, it's easy. And we got to like have his kind of internal monologue and struggle of this thing that was part of himself, but not quite a part of himself. Excuse me. It was not quite a part of himself, and him figuring that out, and it being like kind of a underlying theme throughout the entire book.
Yeah, when he like you said before, when you lose a hand like Luke, like you feel the weight of the moment when he lost it, but it's gone like
And
the
then-
next scene because he's like, oh yeah,
After that, he's like,
and they
cool.
don't really call back to it. But like you said, and also as a kid, I've always wondered like these arms are way stronger and like all of. Why wouldn't you just replace your hands? But
Dengar did.
Dengar went overboard
A little bit.
with Hrothgar Dang, but seeing he has to deal with it and it responds a second slower and it's not exactly what he wants to do, and it's like it also shows the tenderness of the love because as we see at the end of Attack of the Clones, that's the hand that Padme grabs. She never treats it any differently. She never recoils at the touch, even though it's probably cold. I don't know.
Yeah. The touch of the fact that the moment, there's a moment later where he's fighting Asajj and he tries to use the Force and he realizes he used the wrong hand. And the Force doesn't flow through the mechno-arm the same way, which obviously he figures out because we see him throughout the rest of the series use the Force with no hands. But they get cut off.
Wow,
Straight
spoiler
up.
alert!
I don't know if you guys have been to Mustafar, but
Oh God.
it's hot.
He's a big old McNugget in there.
You know what? I wish McDonald's would fry their McNuggets that crispy. You know what I mean? I want a little bit more crunch.
Wow.
Sometimes they're soft.
Wow.
And I'm like,
McDonald's.
Once a year,
You're
it's
watching
like
this.
May 4th. We're serving us Anakin style.
Anakin nuggets.
Oh my God.
And they just have like one limb that comes out of them. A little bit on one side.
They have like the head on top. No.
They come in a
Okay.
little box that says "I hate you."
With like the angry emoji. God.
So yeah, then I guess it's time to talk about Cato Neimoidia and Rug or Rook. How do you think that you pronounce that? Because I don't want to call it Rug.
The audiobook version says Rug.
The audiobook version says
We're
Rug.
gonna go with that.
Let's go with that because I kept reading Rug and I was like, it's a little weird.
Yeah, I know. Rug. I think it's Rug. That makes the most sense.
Rug is such a cool character.
Incredible.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And not like a wholesome hero type of character, but just like a person who is like lived through stuff.
It's not a good person at all.
Well, you know, it's complicated, and that's why it reads so well. That's why it's fun and exciting, right? Because you have her, and then you have her, not partner, but like
Her apprentice? No,
Not
they're
apprentice.
partners, but she's more experienced than him.
Yeah.
And his name is
yeah.
Kitar.
Assistant to the regional.
Yeah, my favorite 1980s
Yes,
instrument.
assistant to the regional manager. That's it. But they have such a juxtaposition.
He kind of does have Dwight energy, doesn't he?
Yes, he's very upset.
Yeah, he's such a sad boy.
Yeah.
And I get it. Like, we get there, and by the end of the thing, I get it. But there's a chunk in the middle before you kind of get his backstory,
Like-
where I was a little bit like, Kitar, man. Like,
You gotta
I know you were named after a pretty mediocre instrument, but like, you've got to get your crap together here.
Wow.
How else would you pronounce it? Keter?
No.
No, that's what they say.
Yeah.
It's Kitar.
No, you're right. I just didn't connect it to a keytar. Like,
Well, then you clearly did not watch Chuck the final season.
no, I did not.
The greatest Kitar moment in all of television history.
You can't make me sound like that.
How dare you? This is a happy panel.
This is not a happy panel
Well,
because
no,
there's a terrorist attack. I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember the beginning of the book, but a lot of people die.
You're right. 30,000?
3,200, which
Oh, I thought
it's 3,200.
I can't read. I don't know
It's,
how
you
I
know
got
what? It's
the
great that we have a book podcast
Yeah, you
where
know,
we
it's-
read every week.
It's a good time.
So 3,200. I will say, that number was a little close to some real world things to me. I kind of wish it had been like a different number, but yeah, we meet Rug in the wreckage after Cato Neimoidia has been bombed. Surprise, it was Dooku. Crazy, I know.
Wow.
In the Clone Wars era, Dooku blew something up.
He's a political idealist.
Yeah.
He's just
Innocent.
getting stuff done, you know?
Innocent man. They've gone too far. This is madness. And so the Neimoidians are ostensibly Switzerland,
Yeah, they're neutral. They're
except that they're like the evil Swiss people who live there still.
What is this?
Okay, so what's weird about this is that they're neutral.
Yeah.
But I'm blanking on his name. Newt Gunray can still like go hang out there. He's like an extremist who they're like, that guy's a bad guy who's fighting a war that we don't want to be a part of. But later in the book, they're like, oh yeah, Newt Gunray was there like an hour before. And I'm like, Newt Gunray can just go to Neimoidia, and they're like, oh yeah, you can hang out, but like, oh, you need to stop being an intergalactic terrorist.
Well, it's that's one of the things that makes it so interesting because and we didn't get a lot of this in the Clone Wars, but is a big separation between the Neimoidians, Cato Neimoidia, and the Trade Federation. At least at the start, they're very different entities, and their whole job is to facilitate trade. They aren't shipbuilders. They don't sell weapons or food or anything like that. They just facilitate trade, and so he can come and go. And I'm sure it's super awkward when he shows up. Like,
Yeah, they're like, don't.
but we're neutral, and you're doing stuff to both sides, so
Yeah.
I guess it's okay.
But the book brings up like the Neimoidian culture is built around risk assessment, which I really appreciate. I love that, rather than have everyone kind of think the same way, but some people are bad and some people are good, this book really dives into why culturally people end up thinking the way that they do, right? And I really appreciated this idea of risk assessment, but on the same side, I was like, my risk assessment of him flying to the planet makes it look like we're not being very neutral. Like if he's not on our like Cato Neimoidia no-fly list, I'm saying like they're gonna come fight us eventually to get him. They want him.
Yeah, I didn't even really think about that because I just figured like he's not banned. Like I don't know how that works, and that's
I don't know either.
Like
but
the book
it
doesn't
leads
really
to a
dive
terrorist
into it.
attack an hour after he was in a location, and you're like, well,
I wonder.
you're not keeping neutrality from the war here. Of course, it made it home eventually. If you didn't want the war to ever make it to your planet, you have to kind of keep the leaders of both sides of the war off your planet. But as soon as you start allowing one of them to come, that neutrality wears a little bit thin, and of course you get drawn in, right? And that's my risk assessment. I am now
And the first time I actually did have like a question about this is when they're talking to Palpatine, and then Duke was like, "Oh yeah, I'm also on the line."
You what? Yeah, I was like, Duke,
Yeah, it's a three-way call. It's a three-way call that you do.
But they did it.
Yeah.
They did it like when I was in like grade school, and you would like have a third person on the. For those of you who are young, there were these things called landlines, and the way that they would function is that different landlines in the house would all be on the same line. I know that sounds crazy, but your mom could like pick up the phone in the kitchen and just listen to your conversation, but not tell you that they're there. And so I was like, did they just landline the Jedi Council?
Got him. Like,
All right,
Yeah.
cool. The last time that happened to me, I cried for like 3 days. I revealed some personal
all right. You
truths.
soft boy. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah, we have Duke would be like, you know what? Palpatine should definitely go to Cato Neimoidia to investigate. I don't really know. Like, I think it's to like have a presence there to facilitate this kind of relationship and investigation. I don't really know why Palpatine would have been the right choice here, other than like he has authority. But they're very easily convinced that like, no, send a Jedi. He can actually do stuff, get stuff done. The security doesn't need to be as crazy. Like there's actual things that can happen.
I think Palpatine just wanted to go to Cato Neimoidia and he needed a reason. He just wanted a vacation because
Like, I
Dooku
want to
works
see
for
the
him.
architecture of Cato Neimoidia.
Yeah, and so I think that Palpatine wanted to go, and he was like, I need to engineer a reason to be allowed to go to a neutral planet. Let's just kill a lot of people, and
That sounds like Palpatine.
yeah, that's how
You
he
know?
plans a vacation. you know?
I buy it.
I mean, Palpatine is he's the best at just like chewing the scenery of a room with like a smile that you can tell is like about to cork up because he's actually lying a bunch. And even when Obi-Wan is making a speech on why he should be the one to go, like Obi-Wan sees his little smile and thinks it's in support, but you know really he's like, got him.
Yeah, got him.
Well, and even in that moment, you know, Obi-Wan is like, a Jedi should go, and Palpatine's response is, Obi-Wan will leave tomorrow. Like he really puts Obi-Wan in the corner of being the Jedi to go, and right call, right? Like, God, if Mace Windu went on this mission, things would have gone terribly. I can't imagine Mace Windu would have handled the Cato Neimoidians with any sort of grace here.
Yeah.
Especially while he's so upset that Anakin exists.
He hates Anakin so much, and it's like, I kind of feel bad for Anakin. Like,
Chaco, I know that you were a Mace Windu defender. How did you feel about Mace Windu's appearances in this book?
Oh, I absolutely loved it. Because, here's the thing, like a lot of the discourse around Mace Windu comes from the perspective of Anakin, which is where we hear anything negative, especially in this book. But all of the reasons really do feel justified. Like Mace Windu calls him and he's like, "No, I'm not gonna pick up the phone." Mace is like, "Where are you? Where are you?" I'm flying through a tunnel.
I can't. You're breaking up.
But he was right. He was going off mission. He was going to a super
With a youngling.
unstable
With an actual
position.
child.
With a literal child, which we have not mentioned yet.
Mil's amazing.
She's wonderful.
Very fun.
But yeah, it was a very. It ended up well, but there was a lot of questionable decisions that Mace Windu was like. He's like your coach who gives you tough love, but he knows you can do it. That's what I get from him.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, here's the
And
thing.
with
I feel
apparently
like
the patience to call for 7 hours. I would have given up. I would have been like, Anakin's not picking up this phone.
yeah.
Anakin didn't get fired, so that's how you believed him.
I feel like Anakin always makes questionable decisions, though.